Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because I actually haven't done a review here on NRW for quite some time. The last one I have done was for the movie Lights Out, and this was back in, I think, January or February of this year when I did the review. So I've been MIA when it comes to reviews for the last, 8 months or something like that. So I'm happy to be back, and I'm actually happy to be back to do a review for a B22 film that's been written and directed by a director I'm a massive fan of in Brett Benman for the movie The Pickleball Murders. Now, what's actually really interesting about this particular film was something that, because I had talked to Brett when I was messaging him back and forth about this movie, which was the fact that I never took notice at all when it came to his filmography, the type of films he's worked on and the type of films he has not worked on. And this is actually his first comedy film. And I actually was blown away with the fact that I never took notice of that at all. And that out of all the films he's done, because he's worked on various genres from science fiction to westerns to dramas, even horror films as well, too. And not once did it ever occur to me that he had never done a comedy film. And I think part of the reason why I never felt that way is because in his movies, there are some comedic moments, and some of them are actually quite good, especially when it comes to Tom Hallam and Billy Blair. Because there are some moments in some of those films that I've done reviews on that are genuinely funny. So I guess due to that reason, it just never occurred to me that comedy was a genre that he should take on here. And I don't know why I never thought that, but the fact that he pointed out here to me, I was very interested in checking out this film. And to my genuine surprise, I had a great time with this movie. I will be the first to admit, though, that this is going to be a film that's not going to be for everybody. Obviously, film is subjective, so that's nothing new I'm going to say here about that. But the reason I'm pointing that out specifically in the beginning here is because I know there are going to be some people who may watch this movie and will probably be pissed off about some of the shit that goes on in the film. But for me, at the end of the day, I was thoroughly entertained. I had a great time with the characters, and I really did like the story at the end of the day. And what's also interesting, too, is the fact that I'm not going to go into any spoilers here, but I'll be the first to admit, though, you can pretty much see the writing on the wall when it comes to the characters that are, as far as the outcome is going to be concerned, because it does deal with a particular man that's setting up a tournament and it's sudden death. And by sudden death, it means whoever loses gets killed. So that is something that I found to be quite interesting as the story progresses. But then the way the film ends, though, I'm left to believe that if they are really going to take on a big chance with this movie and then go something really grand as far as the sequel is concerned, if it ever were to occur, I'd be really curious to see what direction they're going to be taking, considering where the film last left off by the end of this movie. So very interesting to talk about this here. But again, I'm not going to get into a lot of spoilers here. Again, even though you're going to see the writing on the wall, but I just figured that just the way that the film ends, it's probably left for you it's best for you, I meant to say, for you to just check out the film, see it for what it is, and if you like it, great. And if you don't, okay, it is what it is. So I will get into my positives, then I'll get into my negatives, and then I'll get into my rating. The greatest pickleball players in the world are invited to a winner-take-all tournament with deadly consequences. And that right there is the film in a nutshell. So now let's get into my positives. So my first positive of this movie has to do with the actors along with the comedy in this movie too. I think I mentioned beforehand in the beginning of this review that I had some slight concern of whether or not if the humor would work in a long form for Brett Benman in this particular movie. Now, before I saw the film, I do remember thinking that when I had all the previous Brett Benman movies I've seen before, like Copper Bill, even 90 Feet from Home, what else? Bull Shark, Andromeda, and the various other films, Rodeo Thief, Operation Overlord, just to name a few. I do remember whenever there's some comedic moments in those respective films, they all worked. Now, not all those movies have comedic beats in there, but I'm throwing these names out there as far as the movies I remember watching off the top of my head. But when there were some comedy beats in those movies, I never had a recollection of whether or not it didn't work for me, or it wasn't that funny, or it was okay. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I do have some genuine memories of like being laughing at those scenes and thinking that the actors that were delivering the comedy beats and saying the lines or whatever else, they've all done a phenomenal job. Like Billy Blair, Tom Hallam, Tom Zimbrod, Robert Keith, just to name a few. So when it comes to those respective performances from all those actors in those films, when it came to the comedy beats, they all worked quite well. So I do remember thinking that before I saw this movie and having a lot more confidence, even though I was still very interested in checking out the movie, that this could actually work out, and it flat out did for me personally. As far as the actors are concerned, I point out the actors as being as far as the first positives because I am not familiar with all the actors here. In fact, I'm only familiar with one actor. Well, I'll get into a little bit here, because I'm really aware of like Tom Helm's comedy beats, comedy timing rather, Tom Zimbrod, Billy Blair, just to name a few. And when it comes to them delivering comedy beats in those respective films that they worked on, I thought they were hilarious. I thought they were really, really good. So to see some new fresh faces in a genre that Brett is taking on for the first time, I just was not sure if they were going to be able to carry that. And not to say that I didn't think they would ever do that because I'd never seen their work before, but it was just more in a sense like, I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. That's basically the bottom line here. And I will say that as far as the actors are concerned, there's quite a few of them here, but I'm going to say right off the bat, the first one that comes to mind that is one of the best things about this movie is Tiffany Bentman, who is Brett Bentman's wife, one of the producers in the movie as well too, who plays the character Trailer Park Teresa. I thought her character was fucking hilarious. There was actually some. I'll say that there was a very genuine surprise from her performance that I was actually. I'm not gonna say I was shocked, but just like I was just like blown away to see her do this here. Because if you ever watch a lot of B22 films, you'll see that a lot of the performances that she has in those respective films that she's been on, like for example, like The Rodeo Thief, even a movie like Andromeda, Bull Shark, for example, there really isn't a lot of comedy. In fact, barely at all from her, with the exception of just Bull Shark being the really main one that sticks out for me. Even though her performance isn't like hilarious, but it was just the things that she was doing I thought worked quite well, and they were kind of funny in the movie too, especially with Bull Shark, I should say. But to see her just being a flat out like a rude, blunt, nasty, just disrespectful person. Like she's farting at meals, smoking while she's playing, smoking while she's eating in front of everybody, and talking about winking with a brown eye. It's just like I did not expect that at all from her, and it came off beautifully coming from her because she did a really good job and making the scenes work so well because the humor that goes on this movie, like I said before, is a lot of juvenile stuff, and in some cases it may not work for a lot of people because this is a lot like middle school, high school or type of humor. But if it's funny for me, I'm gonna laugh. So I thought it worked quite well, and I will also kind of give a little bit of spoiler here. She does meet her demise, and I remember thinking at that moment when she dies, I was like, oh shit, will the movie still be funny afterwards? I remember thinking that. And then it wasn't until I'm going to point out the actor's name. I believe his name is Garrett Davis, who plays the character of Chaz Bonner. He was pointing out about when her character died, she starts farting, and he's talking about like, well, this is normal, and he's reacting. When he did that, I thought, okay, we're in good hands because not to say that I didn't think Garrett could carry the film. I knew he could from his performance that I saw here so far, but I'm going to talk about his performance in a little bit here. But when I saw his reaction in that scene, I actually felt quite comfortable because I was like, okay, this movie still has legs. So now going into Garrett Davis here, this is an actor that I am not familiar with at all. I will point out here too that I thought he was really, really fucking good in this movie. He actually does something. He does two things here in this movie that I remember I was just like, it brought a huge smile to my face. Not that I don't think it's gonna blow anyone's minds off by any means. It's just that it was just one of those things that I remembered when I was watching the movie. I thought, oh, this is from pro wrestling. Two examples I'm going to give here is the fact that he had to take a massive dump, and when he took a dump, he says, "Who does number two work for?" That's directly from Austin Powers. And then when he was playing a pickleball tournament up against Trailer Park Teresa, he ends up getting a point, and in the process, he does the DX suck it thing where they do this and they do this. He does that in the movie, and I thought Attitude Era, the DX. I knew it right away. Whether or not that was intentional, I have no idea. But it was one of those things I was happy to see, and it brought a huge smile to my face. So there's little wonderful Easter eggs that the actors are doing and saying that brought me back to some films and times of my life where I remember watching those things, and it just was a very genuine surprise for me that I brought a big smile to my face. But going back to his performance here, though, one thing about his particular character in Chaz Bonner was that I I thought that his character, I don't know how to describe it here, but I didn't think much of his character at all. I just remember thinking him he was an awkward guy, and I thought he was good enough. But I do remember thinking like halfway through the film, because he kind of starts off as very, very, very awkward. Like he's just like that. He just doesn't have like a very manliness persona about him at all whatsoever. And I thought that in this particular case, I'm going to jump ahead with another cast member here in Liza Slaughter. I thought she was going to be the one that was going to be carrying the responsibility of like, yo, how are we going to figure this out? What are we going to do here? This is how we're going to do this here. I thought she was going to be the one doing that because in the very beginning of the movie, when you meet her and Chaz, her character I forgot to mention here is Trish Lawless. She has a very strong personality, a very brash personality, she's very quick with her humor as well too. So I thought that she was gonna be the one that was gonna be handling all those responsibilities. But to my genuine surprise, when things start to get worse, when the all the characters find out that when they're participating in this tournament and that the guy who's hosting the tournament says it's gonna be sudden death, they all assume that it's gonna be like once they lose, they go home. They get killed in the process once they lose the game. That brings a genuine concern to everybody. Everyone's scared out of their minds and they're panicking. And she was that one person that I thought was going to be like, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. And in fact, it turned out to be Chaz. And one thing I will point out about Eliza Slaughter's performance, and I'll point more about her later on, but I was actually genuinely happy to see that she had like this really just a bravado about her, and then she shows concern and she shows she's genuinely scared, but not once did I ever see that she was fragile, like oh my gosh, she can't do it, and she. It was nothing like that at all. In fact, it was quite the opposite. She was just concerned because clearly no one expected this here, and she was like, okay, what are we going to do? And then Chaz is coming with all the plans. And she's like, okay, well, is this going to work? Or is that the best you got? Or, she's like challenging him in the process. And then if she found that the idea seemed reasonable, she went along with it. So it was one of those things where you get to see the chemistry between these two characters that are forming a relationship, a relationship where since they first met, they're kind of building that trust, and then eventually you can see that they genuinely do like each other as the story progresses along the way. But it was one of those things where the tables kind of turned where I thought one person was going to be the complete bitch, to be honest with you, and then the other person was going to be the man of the relationship, if you will. And I thought it worked quite well to see that Chaz was the guy that was going to get handling things, but he is completely awkward in the whole process. And under Garrett's performances here, he had done a really good job when it came to delivering those beats because even though the character does have a development where he's taking on a handle of things and trying to find a solution to these problems, he's still the exact same guy. But you get to see that he's come to terms where he's got to overcome these massive hurdles that he's dealing with here, and in the process trying to help other people along the way as well too, which is a very nice a genuine character trait that we get to see through his performance here. Now going into Liza Slaughter's performance here, I pointed out before that when you see her character in the very beginning of the movie, that she has this really bravado about her, and then when shit hits the fan, you get to see that she's completely scared. So you get to see more or less like a chink in the armor where the person that you get to see as far as her being like this, like like nothing phases me, instantly turns off, and not once did I ever think that, oh, she's like a completely weak person. Not the case here at all. She definitely does have a lot of strength about her, but she's clearly very concerned about her well-being, the well-beings of others as well too. But at the same time, she's also able to listen and hear some plans out, in this case from Chaz, and give the benefit of doubt. And even when he asked her, do you trust me? And she's like, yeah. So you get to see that relationship that had been established early on does progress from there, and the formation, the partnership that these two form together here does work quite well, in my opinion. And a lot of it does have to do with performance as well too. And she even still comes up with a lot of quick whips in a really stressful situation that she's able to kind of spew off there, and she delivers it quite beautifully, in my opinion. Now, as far as another actor is concerned, this is actually an actor that I had seen before in the movie The Killing of Billy the Kid, who was in the actor by the name of Paul Addison. He was the only actor that I recognized in this movie. And his character in Larry Lobstopper, um, I do remember thinking that he could be the guy too that would take over. Like he's kind of like the guy that comes out of left field that would be able to save the day, if you will. The total opposite of that. He's a guy who's pretty much like a guy that is who obviously knows he's good looking, and as far as the character is concerned, and he's hitting on, in this case, he's hitting on Trish Lawless, clearly showing that he has a thing for her, and invites her over to his room, etc. And then when it comes to the sudden death aspect of the tournament, when they're saying, "Hey, we're gonna try to prolong the games to try to figure out a plan to see what we can do to try to get out of this here all alive," and then he's like, "Fuck all that. I don't want to die." So, and the fact he's playing against a woman that he has a crush on, and he's playing against her, he's like, "Fuck her. I'm gonna win. I don't want to die because there's no way I'm gonna lose in this game because this is not gonna happen." And he completely destroys the plans that everyone had intended on doing here. So you can clearly see he doesn't care about anybody here at all but himself. And I think he delivers that so effectively in that movie, and I'm sorry, in this film, that when it came to his demise, I was happy to see him go. Not to say that I didn't like the actor portraying him. I just thought the character was a douchebag, and you kind of see in the beginning of the movie, and then as it progresses along the way, you definitely see it come out under the worst circumstances. And again, when you see his demise, I was happy to see it. But that's a lot of credit to Paul Addison, who did a really good job in portraying his character. Because what he had done in Billy the Kid, although he was good in that movie, but he really wasn't a standout in that film. But again, he's still great in that movie. But in this particular case here, I noticed him in this movie a lot more than I did in Billy the Kid. And I thought he was great in Billy the Kid, but this movie really made me look out for him more as far as what he can do as an actor for some reason. Now, as far as some of the other actors are concerned in this movie here, I'm going to point out here that we have an actor by the name of Mr. Damon Waters, who plays the character of Soft Serve Steve, who is a guy who you can barely understand, doesn't say a whole lot. And then there's also an actor by the name of Joey Meritis, I think is pronounced his name, who plays the character Tony Tourette. I thought his character was kind of funny, but I knew right away, as soon as I saw those two guys, like, oh, these guys are body bags. I just knew that right away. Now, and I thought they were good too. So not to say, not to kind of just leave them hanging there. They did a really good job with their performance and providing the comedy beats that's required from them. I thought they did a really good job in this film. Now, as far as the guy who is hosting this tournament, that's by a guy by the name of Chong Su, played by the actor Gordon Burns. I will say right now, off the bat, I probably can see a lot of people who will watch this movie and say they don't like this character, not because of what he's setting up for everyone else to go through, but just due to the fact that he's kind of playing in a lot of ways a very stereotypical Asian type of character. I'm going to say right now, I don't really necessarily agree with that in this movie because when you watch the film, if you watch the movie and you really pay attention to the details of the film, you will notice that this is a guy that's fully in charge. And not only in charge, taking control of the situation, but he's also funny. He's hilarious. And he's also a guy that I thought did a really good job. And when he's repeating a lot of these jokes in the movie, I thought they worked quite well. And that's a testament to his performance in this movie. I will also point out too that this is one reason why I think a lot of people may find this film quite offensive. But like I said, if the comedy works and I see the where the humor is coming from and it makes sense, I'm all for it. And I thought everyone in this movie, including Mr. Burns here, did a really good job when it comes to what they were delivering in this movie. Barnes, I meant to say. I said Burns, I meant to say Barnes. But as far as the actors are concerned, I really thought that everyone had done a really good job in making this movie. And you can kind of tell that a lot of these guys had a lot of fun making this movie too. You could see that in the performances. But when it came to more of the dramatic beats, I thought everyone did a really good job when it comes to those dramatic moments. So it's basically the flip side of things where you have a dramatic film that have some comedy beats that worked phenomenal. Now you flip it around, you have a comedy film that has some minor dramatic beats in the movie, and they all worked quite well. So that to me is a testament under Brett Memons' writing and directing here. When you watch this movie, this is a film I remember distinctly thinking this has Brett's personality through and through. Because I had a lot of conversation with Brett, both in private and on my show as well too, and you get to see that he's actually a really funny guy. He has a really great personality, and he's a really nice guy as well too. And when I watched this movie, I saw his personality, at least from my perspective, through and through. Like I really saw this is Brett's humor all the way through. So there's a lot of things that I felt like that Brett does really, really good in when it comes to his directing and his writing. That when you see the flip side of the genre, in this case being comedy and having dramatic beats, they work just as well. And you watch a movie like Rodeo Thief or even Copper Bill, where there's a lot of dramatic themes over that with some comedy beats, they work effectively in those respective scenes. So that to me is a testament as far as Brett Bittman as a storyteller is concerned that I always felt like he was really, really, really good at. So a lot of props to him, props to everybody for the story that we get to see here because this is a genuine surprise for me that I honestly did not expect and never thought about for him to try consider doing here. And I'm glad that he did because it was a genuinely good time for me personally. The one thing I will say to close out here with my positives is really with the story in itself. Now, I will be the first to admit this is not the most original story ever written. It really isn't. But I will say though that considering that the plot synopsis in this movie could be handled horribly in this film, I got to give credit to everybody involved with the story where they even point out the flaws in this film too, because they point out in the narration. I forgot the actress who does the narration in this movie, but they point out that we know this isn't the rules of pickleball, but fuck, it's a movie. They point those flaws out right away. All the things that shouldn't have worked, it doesn't make sense. They are very aware of it, but they're also self-aware of the fact that this is a movie. That is something that Brett says a lot. When you look at a movie like Operation Overlord, which a lot of people probably did not like, that we're pointing out as far as the negatives are concerned, he tells everybody, listen, it's a World War II film, but it's a movie. So it's not going to be 100% accurate. So watch it for what it is. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But understand, it's just a movie. That's what this movie points out right away. Hey, this is just a movie. So fuck it. We're going to go with it. And I thought that was fucking genius, in my opinion. Now, will that work for everybody? Absolutely not. And I don't even know what the general consensus is going to be when it comes to this film, but I will say that I thought that it worked quite well. And that's a testament to Brett Bettman, all the actors, the people behind the scenes as well, too. The music in this movie as well. I forgot to mention here, the music in this film I thought worked quite well in this movie. The humor, the overall bits, I thought worked phenomenal in this movie. So I think this movie may actually be a genuine surprise for a lot of people who come across it. And especially if you're a fan of Brett Benman, I think you will come to like this movie too, considering how well the humor, at least for me, may work for you as well too. So for me, that's gonna be my positives. Now let's get into my negatives. Now, as far as the negatives are concerned, what's interesting for me is that I I remember thinking the negatives that I was thinking about was mainly due to the fact about what other people will think about the film. And I was looking at it from that perspective, like what people not like about this movie. Now, genuinely, I don't know because I'm just making these assumptions here. But the reason I'm pointing that out here is because I remember when I was watching the movie again, and I played much closer attention this time around because before I was just watching just to enjoy it, and then I was watching for analytical purposes. And then I noticed right away with some slips through the crack, if you will. There was one particular scene where you get to see Chong talking to the players at the pickleball court, and there's a microphone cord, a wire that goes right here where the microphone is attached to his shirt, which you don't see, but it was very visible, and I thought this one slipped through the cracks. Another particular scene had to do with where um, Soft Serve Steve has a ball in his hand, but in this particular case, it was two players playing at the same two players playing against other two players for this double whatever it's called here. I'm forgetting all this the lingo here, but the point I'm getting is that you have two players playing against other two players here. Soft Serve Steve playing against with Trish Lawless. And there was a moment in the movie where you know it's going to be Chaz serving the game, doing the first serve of the game. He literally has the ball in his hand, about ready to serve. And then the next scene is Trish walking by in front of Soft Serve Steve, and Soft Serve Steve in the back has a ball in his hand. And I was like, oh, that's another mishap as well, too. That's one slipped through the cracks. So you'll have little moments like that, which I did not notice the first time around, but I noticed in the second time, again, for when I was watching it for analytical purposes to see, like, what will people not like about this movie? Because I can't say that there's not look. It's not a perfect film by any means, so I don't want to make give the impression that when I saw this movie, I thought it was so perfect that it worked well for me. There's nothing wrong with it. There's this movie is not perfect at all, but I came across those little those little mishaps, if you will, that I actually thought worked quite well because it was one of those things where like it was funny to me, but I don't know if it was done on purpose or I mean, maybe it was just one of those situations where this is the best thing we can get and this is what we're going to put in there. It is what it is. Who knows? But all I'm saying is that I was genuinely surprised to see that, and I thought it worked quite well. I thought it was hilarious, and I went with it. As far as any other negatives are concerned that I can think of here, I will say though that there's a lot of plot conveniences. There's a lot of things when it comes to how certain set of events occur that you could see a mile away, and I'm not gonna say it kind of like derailed my enjoyment of the film, but there were times it crossed my mind. I was like, oh, this I wish this could have been handled a little bit better. I wish I would have thought out a little bit better on this and that. But again, considering that this movie was shot in a very limited amount of time, very limited budget, um, and just not a lot of not a lot of locations they can work with here. I thought they did a really good job with what they were able to pull off here. And so I'm not saying I'm going to forgive it because I honestly don't really care. As long as the movie is good and it keeps me entertained, that's really what I care about at the end of the day. The negatives are the negatives, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the movie. But there were quite a few times where I felt like this is way too convenient for this to happen. And it just so happens that this guy's going to be able to do this, and this guy is going to be this, and this guy. It was just a lot of convenience that I thought in the film that it definitely was going through my head throughout the narrative on the multiple times I've watched this movie, because I've seen this movie right now a total of 4 times prior to doing this review. So there was something that stuck out for me a lot in this film, but never took me out of the movie, never took away my enjoyment from this film. So if anything, it was just that was really the only major issue that I had with the movie. But overall, I had a good time with the film. So for me, that's gonna be my negatives. Now let's get into my rating. There is one thing I do got to say about Brett before I give my rating on this movie here, and I think I might have pointed this out before in this review where I Brett's one of those guys that is not afraid on taking on the challenge here. When you look at his line of filmography here, like I said before, he's worked on various genres from like monster flicks to, if you want to call Bull Shark that, science fiction, what else? Westerns, dramas, horror, and now comedy. This is a guy that you throw something at him, he'll take it on full on. I genuinely do believe he's that type of guy. At the same time, after I saw the Pickleball Murders, I remember thinking about what he was able to do in that movie, and it got me thinking about other things that I remember thinking like, what hasn't he had done yet in the action genres in one film? I believe, if I recall correctly, as far as a full-on action film is concerned, he has never done. I would love for him to take on that kind of genre because this is a guy that's worked on everything else. I would love him to try to take on the action genre. Now, the action genre is not the action films, I should say, is not an easy film to make. They're just really difficult because you have to have a lot of patience and you have to have the right people involved, especially if you don't have a lot of time to choreograph some stuff and be able to get as many shots as you need. Like you have to have the right people involved to get everything done on point, and you just have to have the best of the best that you can afford or can get at the time. And I believe that Brett can be able to pull that off here if given the opportunity. Because when you look at a movie, for example, like The Killing of Billy Kid, there's one particular sequence in that movie where James Storms and Tom Helm have a fight scene, and it worked so good. And that was choreographed by James Storm. And I'm thinking to myself, if he can get the right person involved to choreograph the fight scenes and let them do work their magic, if you will, in those particular scenes, and then just Brett just say, oh, put the camera over there, and we're going to do this. There's a lot that he can do with that movie, or with the genre, I should say. And I'm really genuinely excited to see what he's going to work on next when it comes to something I've never seen him do before. Or maybe he's worked on that genre before, but a different version of the genre or a different element that we haven't seen him take on before within that genre. So I'm a big genuine fan, I should say, of Brett Bama's work. And I think that if given the opportunity to take on things to the next level, this guy can do some wonderful things. And I'm really excited to see, like I said before, what he's going to be working here in the next coming films he's got coming down the pipeline here. So as far as Pickleball Murder is concerned, this is a movie that I think may actually surprise a lot of people. If you really give the time of the day just to watch it for what it is, I think you may enjoy it. And I actually think you'll have a great time with it as well, too. If it's not your cup of tea, it is what it is. But if you did love it, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below, because that movie is available now on Vudu, and it should be releasing somewhere later on down on Tubi, on Amazon, and various other platforms as well, too, where you can rent it and buy it as well. But I'm genuinely excited to see what people are going to think about this film, and I hope you all do enjoy as much as I did, if not more. So for me, as far as the rating concerned for the Pickleball Murders, I'm going to give this a solid cheers. And those are my thoughts on the Pickleball Murders. Now, if you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'll make sure I have the link in the description below for you guys to check out the film where you can rent it and buy it. And like I said before, the film will become available on other platforms as well, too, on Tubi, somewhere down the line. So just keep an eye on that one. Just make sure you guys follow B22, Brett Memon. They'll make all those announcements when the movie becomes available for you guys to check out on the respective platforms here. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the NRW and hit the notification bell down there as well, too, while you're at it. And also follow me on social media. Oh, I'm going to say must follow NRW on social media as well, too. Follow NRW on Instagram. New release Wednesdays on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter at the NRW. You can follow me on my social media accounts. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina. Twitter, You're So Cool with WRM. And also on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And that'll be it, guys. I hope you guys enjoy this review. I'm happy to be back doing reviews here again. Look out for my next one that's coming down the line here. And until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.